welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I make content to help encourage Christian singles, and I just want to welcome you here. Hopefully you find some hope here at my channel to see that you are truly not the only one going through just the single season. And I just pray that you find friendships here, that you find a sense of community here, and that you know that God is with you in this season. If you watched my last video, I promised you guys that I would not leave you during the holiday season, and then I left you guys. That was not purposeful. I actually was really sick through Christmas, and I actually didn't even get to spend it with my family because I didn't want to get them sick. My brother has a new baby, and so I didn't want to get anyone sick. So I literally spent Christmas completely by myself. So I'm back. I'm feeling better. I'm like, I still feel like I sound different and still am not looking my best. So I do apologize if I look a little rough in this video, but I did feel like I had something to share, and I just wanted to share what I have been learning with the Lord and what He is showing me in this season. So I do apologize if I look rough. But to get all of that out of the way, I wanted to talk about something that I don't really see talked a lot about for singles, and I wanted to talk about it because I feel like it's kind of like a taboo topic. Like, you don't talk about it because if you do, then maybe there's something wrong with you, or maybe you're not content in the Lord. And I just feel like so many Christians walk in bondage because people are unwilling to talk about certain topics because of how they might be viewed or how it might be perceived. And so I'm sharing this in hopes to break through maybe an area that's been a wound for you or been an area of hurt for you. And I just really pray that this video breaks through some of that. And I have a lot of freedom here on my channel because it is geared towards singles. So I just feel like I'm gonna just be as open and transparent as I can be, and just know that I'm sharing these things because I want you to walk in victory. I want you to be a warrior for Christ, and I don't want anything coming in and hurting you and keeping you from the fullness that God has for you and the victory that He has for you. So with that being said, you may have seen from the title that I wanted to talk about deep loneliness. And I think a lot of times we can experience loneliness throughout our lives, like even if you're not single. But what I wanted to discuss is something, like I said, I don't ever really hear people talking about, and that is a feeling of deep loneliness. So what I mean by deep loneliness is and what really like made me think about this and made me want to talk about it was being sick and just having all these plans for Christmas, and then knowing that I wouldn't be able to like participate in any of that, and also the fact that I was going through it completely alone. And I just remember like sitting in my apartment and just like really experiencing such a deep loneliness, like such a pain that it felt almost unbearable. Like I couldn't escape the loneliness, and no matter how hard I tried to just look at the positive side or just to focus on something else, like I couldn't get away from the feeling of this loneliness. And this isn't the only time that I've experienced this. This whole past year, I've been completely single, and I have definitely had experiences where there's just such an extreme deep loneliness. And I I kind of wanted to describe it as a sense of Like, you have your friends, you have people that you talk to, but at the end of the day, when you come home, you're alone. And it is in that moment where I feel like the deep loneliness like sets in, because you don't have a way to escape it. No matter how much time you spend with friends, no matter how much time you spend doing things, you are always coming home to an empty house, to no one to share your day with, and no one to be affectionate with. And it just makes for this feeling of very deep loneliness, and it's extremely painful, it's extremely hurtful, it's something that you don't want to continue to have to go through. And you wrestle with God about, how do I continue on in this suffering? How do I continue on to be strong for God whenever I'm hurting so badly? And I really felt that during Christmas. I really felt just a hopelessness about my situation as far as being single, and just feeling like I had been very faithful to God and very just obedient in this past year of saying no to relationships that didn't honor God, and just walking in faithfulness and serving God and being a part of my church. And I just felt like, God, I have done nothing but walk with relationship with you, and not out of a obedience to get something in return, but truly just a heart posture that said, God, I'm all in with you. No matter if I ever receive my future spouse, like, I am in with you. And as I was as I was experiencing this just terrible weekend of being sick and being alone, I I just really wrestled with God about my loneliness. And this past week, I have just kind of been getting back into the swing of things, like getting back to work, and just still experiencing that loneliness, and still kind of wrestling with God about, how much longer is this going to be? Like, how much longer is my singleness going to be? So I usually film my videos on a Sunday, and today at church, I just feel like God really gave me an answer to my question of deep loneliness, and really if God was seeing that. And he had already given me like a few passages, Psalm 62, if you wanted to sit down and read that. I felt like that was an answer God gave me about just seeing my faithfulness to him, in Psalm 74 as well. But I was still kind of just wondering, like, God, do you see me? Do you see the loneliness? Do you see the pain of isolation? And I, today in church, really just felt like God gave me a very clear answer on top of the Psalms that he had already given to me. And I just kind of wanted to compact the sermon in a way that may be beneficial for you as well. But the passages were talking about Peter, and how Peter was very passionate about serving God. He was very passionate about just letting it be known that he wanted to follow after Jesus. And a couple of the stories that our pastor shared was how when Peter was going to have his feet washed, he was like, "No, Jesus, I don't want you to wash my feet." And Jesus kind of explained to him why he was washing his feet and the symbol of that. And then Peter was like, "Yeah, like wash everything then." And how he was like pretty much just all in for Jesus. And how when they came to get Jesus, Peter had his sword, and he cut off the ear of the guy, and the soldier. And how Peter was just so passionate to protect and so passionate to defend, and that was just kind of part of his personality. And how Peter also Peter also was the one to get out of the boat, and he was the one brave enough to walk on the water when nobody else would. Peter did. And how even when after Jesus's death, when they were running to the tomb, my pastor always loves to tell the story, but how John says that he beat him to the tomb, but Peter was the first into the tomb. And that kind of just like shows his personality and shows like his passion. And what I wanted to talk about though is one of the things that our pastor brought up is when Peter was told by Jesus that he would deny him, Peter didn't believe that that could even be possible. Like, Jesus, you know that I love you. Like, I would never deny you. And Jesus says, for the rooster crows, you will deny me. And so the scene, the setting is that when they took Jesus in to be crucified, they were like around this fire, and people were looking at Peter and saying, aren't you like with him? And Peter's like, no. And then another person asked, like, yeah, I'm sure, like, you're one of his disciples. And he's like, no, that's not me. And then again someone said it, and then Jesus like looks at him, like they're in proximity enough for Jesus like to see Peter and Peter to see Jesus. And the rooster crows and then Peter in that moment remembers what Jesus had told him about denying him, and Peter like goes away from that moment just sobbing, just completely heartbroken that he had denied Jesus after he had loved him so much and wanted to follow after him. And the way that relates to me as a single is in the struggle of deep loneliness. There's like a heartbreak there, like a feeling of, God, I want you to be everything for me. Like, I want you to be my source of comfort. And but in that moment, you're just hurting so badly. You're hurting because your flesh wants something to comfort, that your flesh wants something to be there with you, and you're in this internal struggle with what your flesh is desiring, what your heart is desiring. And I truly believe that's a lot how Peter felt. You know, he wanted to just be all in with Jesus, but in that moment he was afraid. He was walking in the flesh. And I think when we're experiencing that deep loneliness, it's an experience of walking in a deepness of how our flesh feels and how our desires are just kind of taking over in that moment, and we almost cannot escape it. Just kind of like Peter, he couldn't escape his fear of, denying Jesus in that moment. And how we can relate this to a deep feeling of loneliness is when you are walking in that, it is really easy to walk kind of how Peter did and just be like sobbing, like crying, and feeling like you're never going to get through it. You're never going to experience a victory in this area. Like, deep loneliness is always going to be a part of your story, and then it can be really easy to be very discouraged. With that whole story of Peter, and something that really impacted me today at church was when Jesus came back to his disciples after raising from the dead. And I actually wanted to read it to you. It's John 21, and starting in verse 15, it says, when they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you truly love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my lambs. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you truly love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. The third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him a third time. "Do you love me?" he said. "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my sheep. I tell you the truth. When you were young, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go." Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death which Peter would glorify God. Then he said to him, "Follow me." And there's so much to unpack in that passage, but something that our pastor was sharing was the amount of times that Peter denied Jesus was the amount of times that Jesus restored and healed Peter and asking, "Do you love me?" And Jesus was basically taking these hurts and taking these disappointments that Peter had suffered and reiterating the truth of Jesus's love for Peter and their relationship, and taking every failure that Peter had had and bringing truth into that. And I love it because it's a full picture of what Jesus has for us, which is a true restoration. That Jesus's love for us is radical. It's not halfway. It's not, "I want to leave you in brokenness." Jesus wants to lead you in full restoration, in full healing. And when we have these seasons of deep loneliness, it's not the end of our story. It's not the end of what God has for us. It's not a point where we feel like we are just a failure, that we can never come through this feeling of pain. It's the exact opposite in the Bible. And this story with Peter is a story of hope for us as singles when we are going through these hard seasons and experiencing these deep seasons of loneliness. Those are the times when we get to come back to Jesus and say, "I love you still. I still want to follow you." And in that moment is where Jesus comes and he just restores us. He takes our failures and he takes the seasons where we were just caught up in the hurt and the pain of the flesh, and he takes that and he says, "I am going to restore. I'm going to heal. I'm going to bring you through this. If you trust me, if you truly believe that I'm the good father, that I am faithful, and that I love you." And that was the other part of this sermon, was we please God through our faith. It is impossible. Without faith, it is impossible to please God. And part of, I feel like, the deep loneliness is the enemy's attack on us to lose our faith, to lose our hope that God is going to come through, because all we're experiencing is this deep pain of loneliness. And in that, the enemy wants us just to walk in that instead of walking in faith and belief that God is coming through, that even in the midst of pain and suffering and total isolation, we can still have a hope that Jesus is coming through, that we need to be like Peter and be willing to get back up after our failure and after just succumbing to what the flesh had to say over us. In those moments, just bringing them to Jesus, because Jesus wants to totally restore you, not halfway restore you. He wants to totally restore you. And the story of Peter is really a redemption story. It's a story that says even when we mess up, and even when we fall short, and even when we feel like God isn't coming through for us, in those moments is the opportunity for us to come to Jesus, and Jesus to say, "Do you love me?" And for us to say, "Yes, Lord." And in that, he heals us. He heals us of our failures. He heals us of our flesh, but we have to come to him. We have to continually come to him. And that is a big part of this story that I wanted to share, is if you have experienced deep loneliness and pain in that, to come to Jesus with that and truly just weep before him if you have to, but don't leave with that in hand. Don't go through every day telling yourself, I'll always have this deep loneliness, because that's not what God wants to speak over you. God wants to speak over you that you are a warrior, that you have victory, that because of your faith, God is going before you in a very powerful way. And to have that be your identity, have that be the thing that you hold on to, even in the hard times when you feel like your flesh has won. God is the victory over the flesh. Flesh and sin have been defeated by the blood of the Lamb. By Jesus' death and resurrection on the cross, we do not have to be a slave to fear. We don't have to be a slave to the feeling of deep loneliness. God has the victory over that. I just want to thank you for watching. I pray that this video just encourages you to lean into Jesus and to find your identity in who he is and not your circumstances, because God is still coming through even if you can't see it right now. He is going before you in a very powerful way. So I just thank you for watching, and I pray that your day is blessed. Bye.